So you all know I had to ask for a lavalier mic because I don't want to be constrained behind that podium. And I'm just really humbled by the folks that are in this room. There is a lot of things going on that are capturing the national focus right now. But my frustration for decades now has been what I think is the biggest cancer on our body politic, the biggest shame of our country, is just not talked about enough. We live in this country that is founded by the most precious of ideals, these ideals of liberty and freedom. From Patrick Henry's noble sentiments that ring throughout history, give me liberty or give me death, to the songs of abolitionists and slaves, oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom over me. Before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. This concept of liberty, of freedom, that echoes throughout the land is the symbol of America. It's our common value. So how could this nation that professes freedom and liberty be the incarcerating capital of the globe, incarcerating more people than any nation has done in human history? How can we have that shame? And so this gathering, small group that we are, this is the most important thing happening in Washington, D.C. I have this reverence for the women that are here that have stood up and told their story. You know, Alice Walker, in her book, In Search of My Mother's Garden, she has this chapter called The Black Revolutionary, and it refers to you whether you have black skin or not, because if you are not a revolutionary artist, then you are not upholding the traditions of this country. And she says that the true revolutionary artist is always close enough to the people to be there for them when they're needed. She says the real revolutionary artist is always concerned with the least glamorous of stuff. The raising a child's reading level from 3rd grade to 4th, the filling out food stamp forms for folks because folk got to eat, revolution or not. And I want you to know that I'm here talking about this bill not because of some creative genius of mine, but it happened because when I started talking about issues of mass incarceration, speech after speech, discussion group after discussion group, panel after panel, inevitably, it was formerly incarcerated women that would stand up to me and say, you need to understand the issues facing women in incarceration. And that's the thing, this idea that goes back to the great works of Richard Wright, this idea of invisibility, how we cast each other into an invisible state where we don't see each other. We don't recognize that the values we hail as a country, liberty and freedom and justice, are interdependent values. That we can't hold these values and think that we can drink richly and deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and justice and deny other people that same opportunity. In fact, to deny liberty and freedom and justice and dignity to another is to deny it to yourself. Think about this for a second, what we have done in this nation founded when these principles, we have to admit to ourselves that this nation, the oldest constitutional democracy on the planet Earth, the genius of our founders, we must tell the truth about our history. And if you don't understand your history, you will be trapped and destined to repeat it over and over again. Put a bookmark in that, repeating our history. Because I just want to start there with the founding of this country, because we've got to understand that when the founders talked about freedom and liberty, their very documents betrayed bigotry and sexism at the time. We've got to be honest about from whence we've come. To not be honest then lessens the greatness of America. Look at those founding documents. Women aren't referred to at all. Native Americans are savages. Stokely Carmichael used to always say constitute, constitute. I can only say 3/5 of the word. The story of America, the greatness of America, is not just found in those documents. They'd just be pieces of paper if the spirit of liberty didn't live within the people who, even when they were excluded, they still bought in to the vision and the dream of this country and engaged in a 200+ year struggle to make those ideals real for everyone. We are here right now who can utter those 4 words, I am an American. We can say those words because of soldiers of freedom and liberty that fought and sacrificed for us to expand the conception of liberty for everyone. Folks who sweat for us and scrubbed toilets for us and labored for us in church basements, in barnyards, on beaches, in far-off lands, fighting for our liberty. And we have come a long way as a country. But where we see the unfinished business, the best place to look to find the unfinished business of America is to go to an American prison or jail. And you will see that we as a nation aren't who we swear oaths that we will be, a nation of liberty and justice for all. This country that has 25% of the globe's incarcerated people has created a system that reeks with the injustices of our past. I said put a bookmark in that understanding of history because all of those things is what Michelle Alexander calls the new Jim Crow. If you want to understand how we still haven't shaken those bonds of our past, look at our prisons and jails. I can't sit still when I think about the injustice and the unfinished business of America. I live in Newark, New Jersey. I'm proud. I love my city, and I'm grateful for the kind words that were said. But I've chosen to stay in the same community I moved into when I was in my 20s. Median income in my community is about $14,000 an individual. And when I got to my community when I was in my 20s, it was a jarring introduction to the savage injustices of our country. Because you see, I grew up in Harrington Park, New Jersey, a relatively affluent town. In fact, my family literally had to fight to move into that town as the first black family, getting lawyers and volunteers, a white couple to pose as my parents, because my parents kept being told house after house was sold. On the day of the closing, after the white couple put a bid on the house, bid was accepted, papers drawn up. The white couple didn't show up, my dad did, and a volunteer lawyer named Marty Friedman, real estate agent, was so upset he got caught in the sting operation, he stood up and punched my dad's lawyer in the face and sicked the dog on my dad. Now look, every time my dad would tell the story, the dog would get bigger. Eventually, by the time I was 18 years old, it was a pack of wolves that he fought to allow me to be in the country. But I'm telling you, my childhood was like most Americans. Teenagers do dumb things. They make mistakes, we fall, we get sick. We get addicted to drugs. We violate laws. No different among race, no different among socioeconomic status. But what's different is that we have 2 justice systems in America. One that treats you much better, as Brian Stevenson said, if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. I'm a senator now, so I won't say it's me, but I watched others break laws. I'm not crazy. These things live on the internet forever. I still remember 4 of my friends got caught for breaking and entering. They just went to buy beer with fake IDs. It was broke. They kicked open the door, stole some cases of beer. What happened? Fathers got involved, parents got involved, charges, disappeared, went away, and these guys are doing great things with their lives now. But you need to live in Newark 1 week, and you see that there's an entirely different justice system there. You see, kids at Stanford where I went, we weren't getting stopped and frisked on the way home from frat parties. I could go to college campuses, you could find Adderall, ecstasy, people knew where to get the stuff. Heck, 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to felony drug use and drug possession. It wasn't just a little bit of pot. You know President Bush's story, President Obama's story. But you go to a community like where I live, and you see how a criminal justice system treats you so much differently for making one of those youthful mistakes. We sit here comfortably right now, and there are children in prison waiting months, and they haven't even had a trial yet. And if you look at socioeconomic status, that's bad enough, but if you know our prisons and our jails, they are disproportionately people of color. That's what Michelle Alexander's talking about, because forget socioeconomic status. If you're black in America and white in America, you have no difference in your drug usage rates, no difference in your drug selling rates, but you are almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for that than if you are a person that's white. And so what happens to communities like the one I live in, communities all across this country? You see so many people ground into a criminal justice system that is savagely broken, where just because of your socioeconomic status, you get ground down, arrested. And by the way, when you come out of prison, you face over 40,000 collateral consequences. You can't get a business license, you can't get loans from the bank, you can't get Pell Grants, you can't get jobs, food stamps, public housing. For doing things that many members of Congress have done, suddenly you're shut out from society. And we are comfortable in our freedoms when this is going on. But when people go into those prisons, go into American jails where there's 9 times the admissions in our prisons, and you see that we have a modern day debtor's prisons in America, where folks who just can't pay bail get stuck in those prisons, lose their jobs, their kids go through trauma. But see who we incarcerate? Emma Lazarus talked about, give me you're tired and you're hungry and you're poor, the wretched refuse from your teeming shore. When you read that poem and you visit our prisons, you say, wait a minute, did we say give us these kind of people so we can stick them in prison? Because overwhelmingly, we incarcerate the mentally ill, the poor, the addicted, and the people of color. And that would be enough if this is what I said. It should be enough to arouse our outrage in this country that we have so many people incarcerated in a broken system that gets more and more unfair. 500% increase in our prison population since 1980 alone. People stuck in unimaginable consequences. Children have been to my office telling me stories about being threatened with mandatory minimums stacked up, that if you don't plead guilty to this lesser charge, take your felony and get out of prison into that world where you face collateral consequences. If you don't plead guilty, then I'm gonna put you in adult court and you're gonna face 10, 15, 25 years. That's why we have a book. Great book, you should read it, Why Innocent People Plead Guilty. We say that we have a justice system with trials and judges. We don't have that anymore. 98% of our criminal convictions are now done by plea bargain. And we've given no bargaining power to the people that are the accused. Now this system, this broken system, would be bad enough if it wasn't that the one group I left out that it preys upon, which is women in America. How can we justify a system that takes people who are survivors of trauma, survivors of abuse, and put them on a survivor of sexual trauma to prison pipeline? I just was in Danbury, Connecticut, at a federal lockup, walking in with this incredible warden. Who's tried to create a pilot program in her prison to create a therapeutic community. Unfortunately, it is an anomalous place. And I asked her, how many people in this prison are victims of sexual trauma? And this tough, great leader looks at me and says, about 95%. And what's amazing about women who are incarcerated, and ask women who are incarcerated, I've started asking this question. I just did a live with Teen Vogue and asked the women I was sitting talking with, I just started noticing this. I've visited prisons all over this country, but when women are in prison, there's a sense of solidarity. It's amazing how that women are pulling together, knowing that they are facing injustice, and create these communities of struggle where they watch out for each other, they fight for each other. I sat there in Danbury and had woman after woman pull another woman here. Let me give you the details of this case. They're here unjustly. Can you help us? Can you help us? Can you help us? And the stories of the indignities and the violence, the assaults on humanity going on in our prisons, and we think we're not implicated in this? How dare we think we're not implicated in this broken system, when every case, criminal case, is the people versus, the state versus. That is us. We herald the words of Martin Luther King. We're all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Well, if that's the case, how can we be comfortable as a nation? When on the planet Earth, I said 25% of the imprisoned people in the planet Earth are here in the United States. Well, for women, the data is more stunning. You've already talked about it. The rates of female incarceration is going up 50% higher, faster than the rates of male incarceration. Overall prison populations have gone up 500% since 1980, but women over 700%. And women on the planet Earth, 1/3 of the incarcerated women on the planet Earth are in the United States of America, the land of the free. And when they get there, are they helped? People with addictions, people with mental health challenges, survivors of trauma. 77% of the women that are incarcerated are survivors of partner violence. What do they experience? Having been sexually abused, do male officers, as one woman told me, walk in and when they're undressed, stare at them while they're going to the bathroom? Do we take pregnant women and empower them? No, we shackle them and put them in solitary confinement. When the majority of women are parents, primary caregivers, arrested for overwhelmingly nonviolent crimes, do we try to strengthen that family bond with their children, or do we savagely do everything we can seemingly to sever it, putting up walls where women who don't get access to quality basic sanitary products have to pay for them and then make tragic choices between buying basic healthcare needs or trying to figure out how they're going to afford the usury rates to call their children, often who have been put in different positions, different households, where they have to try to do the math and figure out how they will talk to each of their children on a regular basis. How can we be comfortable as a nation with an injustice this great? This is a stain upon everything we say we stand for. It's not the best of who we are. It's not a reflection of what we're capable of. And we have examples all around this country of people that are showing we can do it in a different way. The only thing stopping us from eradicating this injustice, to have our prisons be in America what they should be, which is a model to the planet Earth of what a free people and a free nation do to those who've done wrong. We have that capacity to set the example, to show folks how we can have restorative justice, to show folks how we can help and heal and deal with trauma. But instead, we have a system that re-traumatizes, hurts. And so today, the handful that we are, we have got to get ready. Because I'm sorry, history in our country has shown that no step towards freedom, no steps towards liberty, no steps towards justice were easy. Every single one, there were sacrifices and there were struggles. There was pain and there was hurt. And I'm one of these people that tells you right now, if your country has not broken your heart, you don't love her enough. We should all be broken by this system, hurting from it. We should not be comfortable. And so I came here today to call on folks. You've heard the voices, you've heard the data, you've heard the reality in this nation, you've heard the shame and the dark places. You've heard the people cast into invisibility standing up, insisting that folks listen, letting their voice be heard, echoing those words of a great Congresswoman, Shirley Chisholm, who said, if they're not going to give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Let's lean on the words of freedom fighters of past who tell us and instruct us. Frederick Douglass, those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are like those who want the crops without the plowing up the ground, like those who want the waters without the thunder and the lightning, those who want the oceans without the roar. We are a nation that has shown if there is no struggle, there is no progress. And so I'm calling on everyone here to think about what our obligations of citizenship is. We who benefit from struggles past, what is our obligations of citizenship? Because we weren't there when men and women in slums, in Irish slums, stood up and fought for the workers' rights that we take for granted. We were not there. In those dark corners of our country where the greatest infrastructure project ever was constructed, the Underground Railroad, we weren't there. On buses doing freedom rides, knowing that we would get beaten. We weren't there in Selma. We weren't there at Stonewall. We weren't there at Seneca Falls. But we are here now. Our history is a testimony to a conspiracy of love. We're ordinary folks who weren't immediately infected by an injustice stood up and said, I will be counted. Like Marty Friedman in a real estate agent's office, standing next to a black family trying to integrate his community, who stood up and took a punch for our nation. He could have easily sat back and done nothing. Nobody would have called him out. And so what are we willing to do? What sacrifice are we willing to make right now, right here? There's a poem that I love by Maya Angelou, and I'll read 4 stanzas. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I rise. Do you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise into a daybreak that's wonderfully clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of a slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. This mission, this fight, you need to understand. I'm proud of the legislation that I wrote with Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and Dick Durbin. I'm proud of my partners, but you all know the truth. Change has never come from Washington. It always comes to Washington by people demanding it and fighting for it and struggling for it and sacrificing for it. There are people hurting right now in our nation, our sisters, caught in situations of abuse and violence and hate, sucked in by a system that is indiscriminate to their pain. They're losing faith in who we say we are. They need folk who are not going to preach right and do wrong. They need folk who remember what it took to get them to their freedom land. They need folk who understand that our dignity is her dignity, our freedom is her freedom, our justice is her justice. This is the United States of America. We stand for something. I get tired of religious folk sometimes. I'm one of these people that say, before you speak to me about your religion, show it to me in how you treat other people. But we have a civic gospel. We preach the words, we sing the songs, we say we are a nation for liberty and justice for all. We swear that oath, but it's about time we stop being about words and start being about action. And so I call on this room to get folk woke. I call on this room to be the freedom fighters that this day and age needs. I call upon this room to never accept a nation of freedom and justice that denies it to the poor, to the weak, to the addicted, to the people of color, to women. I call on this room now to rise like generations before. I call on you to rise like our ancestors, like our foremothers and forefathers. I call on us to rise. And I'm telling you right now, our generation has a test of history before us. And this is the test. And I believe if we work together, if we sacrifice together, if we rise up like generations past, that we can be a nation where justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Thank you very much.